back here on the Cover 3 podcast. Sometimes we like to check in after year 3. Sometimes we like to check in after year 4. A lot of coaches don't even make it to year 4. So as we prepare for year 2 for last year's coaching hires, I want to run through and just ask some simple questions. Did you meet expectations? And what is the outlook moving forward? Bud Elliott, do you think that Kalen DeBoer, falling short of the college football playoff, but very much being in the mix, right on that cut line, do you think Kalen DeBoer met expectations in year 1 in Tuscaloosa?
No.
Yeah.
Definitely not. I don't know that my opinion of him as a coach has changed materially, but he definitely missed expectations. Like, nobody at Alabama thought we were going to miss the 12-team playoff. And when you laid a total egg against Oklahoma and got embarrassed, you lost to Vanderbilt. Like, no, you didn't meet expectations. And you definitely didn't meet the expectations of most Bama fans. I don't think you met reasonable expectations. There's no way.
Agreed. I mean, it's a very high bar to clear. Like, I think that every reasonable Alabama fan understood that they probably weren't going to win a national title right away after losing Nick Saban in the first year of Kalen DeBoer. And there were a lot of changes, and you thought there would be some bumps. But I still think that at the end of the day, you were like, well, we'll be in the playoff. We'll be competing for the SEC. And you didn't really do either of those things.
I'm probably not as harsh because I think my expectations were pretty low going into the season. Like, I thought if you would have said 9 wins, I would have said, all right, that's not awful. I get like the backlash, but the losses and who they came to, I think, are what makes it below the expectations, right? 9-3 in a, all by itself isn't that bad, but losing to Vanderbilt for the first time in forever, getting, beat down by a very average Oklahoma team, that's what makes it disappointing. Not to mention, an ugly bowl loss.
I think that matters when we're talking about perception and fan feeling. Like Bud's, like not changing the way that we, analyze Kalen DeBoer, but that was an awful showing in the bowl game against Michigan. And so to have that after a bunch of other eggs that you had laid coming down the stretch, not great. But what about that? What about that second part? No, Bud says no concern. Danny, you think they're good to be able to meet expectations and or exceed them this year?
I do. I think they're going to have different, more consistent quarterback play. Like, they're going to lose the dynamic running aspect of Jalen Milroe, but I think whoever wins that job, whether it's Ty Simpson or somebody else, I think the addition of Ryan Grubb, him coming back to pair with Kalen DeBoer for the offensive, attack, I think that'll bring more stability. I think there was it's hard when you go from one culture to another culture that is entirely different. And I think some of the players probably took advantage of them, and it was a little bit painful. And that's probably why they lost to Vanderbilt right after they, have one of the season. So I think that probably had a lot to do with it. So I think that that kind of shock to the system will be a little bit smoother this year, where everybody kind of knows what's expected of them, and it doesn't have to be, a negative thing that it's different than Nick Saban.
Beating Georgia didn't count for anything because of what happened after.
Yeah, pretty much.
That should have been the capital S signature win, and just was not able to follow that up. All right, let's keep it in the SEC. Tom, you think Mike Elko? How do we grade? How do we rate or look at Mike Elko's first year at Texas A&M?
I would say you lived up to expectations. I think that if you're Texas A&M, obviously we know what the goal is. What they've spent money on over, however the last few years, how much they gave Jimbo Fisher. Like 8-5 as a record is not exactly going to be good enough going forward. But in the first year, like, you looked at how the season went. If you break it down, they were what? They started 8-2. They were in the playoff hunt. They were in the running for it, and then they kind of fell apart at the end. They had the 4 overtime loss to Auburn, which was not a game that they should lose, but, that happens. You lose to Texas, which was, not a very good performance. Like, your offense sucked in that game, and then you lose the bowl game. So you go from 8-2 to 8-5. So you leave the season with a sour taste in your mouth. But I think overall, it was a good season for Texas A&M. You lost early in the year to Notre Dame. That team went on to reach the title game. So it's not like that was a bad loss. That was a good loss. Your other loss was to South Carolina, which was another good team. outside of that Auburn game, there really weren't any games you could look at and say, wow, we played well below our expectations for what this team should be doing. So I would say he met expectations, but I suggest winning more than 8 games this year,
though. I kind of feel like he's just not Jimbo, so the fans are all about him.
That's part of it, yes.
Yeah.
Like less embarrassing moments. It felt like the team played hard for them, but they do lose a lot off that team, and they're putting a lot of eggs into the Marcel Reed basket. So, I mean, I don't know. Like, if they take a step back this year record-wise, which they could, certainly, are fans still there? Because I think Elko's a good coach, right? I think he gets the most out of his teams for the most part. That's a hard league to win. And like, how much more are you expecting? They're probably expecting a whole lot more, but it's not like they went out and just crushed the portal. You know, they lost their leading receiver to Georgia. I think he's like a good, competent coach, and like definitely a reset over what they had with the craziness that was the Jimbo era. But I don't. It's kind of hard to gauge. I don't know. We're doing Texas A&M, I think tonight actually for summer school. So if we had done the show tomorrow, I would give you a better read on what the exact fan base vibe is.
So I think kind of the opposite of Kalen DeBoer. I had higher expectations for Elko. I bought in fully before the South Carolina game, and
they got dog walked in that game.
They got dog walked. I thought that was probably the disappointing. So like quickly, I after they beat LSU, I was all in. I was like, the Marcel Reed switch was it. You know, you saw flashes against Florida, so I was like, man, this team's the best team in Texas. I still thought they could have played better against Texas. The offense, I guess, would say the thing that disappointed me, and that's what concerns me going forward, is I was all in on Marcel Reed. And like Bud said, I think Texas A&M is too, and that makes me a little bit nervous based on how he played down the stretch.
Still a high floor.
Yeah.
Right? To me, that's the Texas A&M. The team is too talented. I have too much belief in Mike Elko that it does seem as though we've got your Texas 8-4. You know, you've got like a 7-5 kind of floor. But if you're going to talk about any kind of steps forward, if you're going to talk about being in the hunt deeper, then it does require Marcel Reed to show us things he didn't show us last year. And look, Marcel Reed was thrown into the fire.
Right.
If you were thinking about the development of Marcel Reed, you probably were hoping Connor Wegman was your quarterback all last season. Maybe you sprinkle some Reed in and then Reed takes over. But, we'll see if he grew from those experiences. I think it is the simplest answer is to point to the quarterback to talk about a team ceiling. But for Texas A&M in particular, it does feel super appropriate. What about Mississippi State? How do you judge Mississippi, like success for Jeff Lebby in year 2?
Failure to meet expectations.
Really?
Let's play a game. Who were the 2 teams Mississippi State beat last year?
Was it Arizona?
No.
Oh,
they only had 2.
Oh, the mute button won again.
Oh man, come on.
Found them.
They lost to Toledo at home.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
they lost to Arizona State.
Yeah, they beat Eastern Kentucky and UMass. Yeah, those were their 2 wins. They lost to Toledo at home. They lost to Arizona State, which, hey, Arizona State went on to win the Big 12, got to the playoff. Not a bad loss in the hindsight, but still, they went 0-8 in SEC play, and they lost by 18 points per game in conference play. They just weren't competitive.
And I genuinely think teams stopped trying against them.
Oh, because of pace and play calling. I was talking.
Yeah, how do I say this in a way that I think there was a little wink, wink, nod, like, hey, Mississippi State is an all-out Bryles tempo team that just all of a sudden is not running that in some of these games. And I think, like, look at the Texas game, okay? They all of a sudden dialed down the tempo a ton. Texas is like, hey, man, I see you. Cool. Like, we're not sending guys home from third base. We're going to just, run the ball, get out of here. Like, we'll cover, but, like, not by a million. Like, you guys don't have an SEC roster, and we don't need to, run 90 plays and get our starters hurt. So I actually think they were like legitimately a lot worse than their advanced metrics showed. I think the Georgia game showed that too. I think that Mississippi State actually showed good fight against A&M. I think A&M saw those prior games was like, this team is garbage. And I mean, they were kind of right, but like, I think A&M had to kind of turn it on later in the game, because A&M kind of played that game like they were a Texas or a Georgia, and they weren't really that level of team. So, I mean, guys, their over-under is 3.5. What did Jeff Lebby get guaranteed money for taking this job? I mean, like, that's kind of the real question here, right? Like, I mean,
I think they should send a thank you card to Ryan Walters and Purdue, because if not for the Boilermakers last year, Mississippi State was the worst Power 4 team in the country.
And that's what is it, LSU versus FAR put in the chat. Is Jeff Lebby on the Ryan Walters track? He might be.
Maybe. Yeah. Depending on what's available and who wants the gig.
Well, I mean, like, you got to make them bleed, right? I mean, somebody said, like, what is a step forward for Mississippi State? It's like, just make your opponent sweat, just like create some discomfort. And it wasn't as though, I don't know what else Mississippi State can do. Right? I would love to
take the loss. That's, I mean, they don't get Kentucky every year on an annual basis anymore. So that was their kind of not easy win, but easier game against the East.
Like the closest thing to a coin flip that they were going to get.
And if you look at their 2025 schedule, and you've got Arizona State again, at least that's at home this time. Like, your non-con is at Southern Miss, Alcorn State, Northern Illinois. He lost to Toledo. So, like, I think they're going to beat Southern Miss, and I think they will beat Alcorn State. I can't guarantee they'll beat Northern Illinois.
Blake Shapen still in the league. He'll be leading that offense again.
I mean, he's going to walk with like $15 million guaranteed before taxes.
And living in Starkville.
It's
overhead.
A lot. Yeah. I mean, so like, it's a great deal for Jeff Lebby. That was an extremely hard job to take over. I don't really think anybody would have succeeded there. I'm not like closing the door on this chapter quite yet, but I mean, their win total is 3.5.
But it's such an opportunity. Like, I think if you're a Mississippi State fan, you look at the success that Dan Mullen had and Mike Leach had. Those are great coaches. I think that's what you want. That's what you need to have. Somebody has a great mind with an offense that can really exploit things, and you try to get a defense that plays hard and maybe creates a few turnovers. But it is a tough place to win.
They've had so many like things that, like with Leach, which Leach's death, that has a huge effect on the program and the trajectory, because the way things were going, you were thinking with Mike Leach, well, we're going to be fine for a while. We might not be winning the SEC. We might not get to the playoff, but we're going to have a solid program. So his death just kind of throws everything like out the window, and now you're just kind of scrambling.
Also, that's probably the program in the SEC that has been the most negatively impacted by NIL.
Ooh, explain.
I just think they're broken.
They don't have any.
They don't have any. Okay.
Yeah.
It wasn't like there was a big booster who left.
Even Walker's broke. He's not supporting the team. Like, if they had a lot of players who other teams wanted to take, they're going to lose some. I think they have enough to keep. Now, granted, this is good and bad. They don't have many guys who other teams want on that roster, right? So they can afford to keep the few that they do have. But if you end up getting good, that means you have more guys that other teams would want. And that's where I have my doubts they can actually hold on to that many guys if you're bidding against other teams in the league. Also, like, Mississippi State's a prime candidate to get plucked by like a Miami, a Florida State, a Clemson, if Clemson wants to get in the game, Ohio State, like your bigger non-SEC teams as well.
Before we hit a break and turn our attention to the Big Ten, where we will get into Curt Cignetti, I think it's obvious about the expectations, but what is the outlook moving ahead, and much more. At 9:03 a.m. Eastern time, our friend Coach K33 said, assuming all NIL is equal, which isn't reality, but it's a nice hypothetical, which of these year two coaches would you want to lead your team? We've already discussed Kalen DeBoer, Mike Elko, Jeff Lebby. We got a couple more, or maybe if there's an off-the-board hire you want to point to. If NIL is equal, which of these hires would you want to lead your university?
Kalen DeBoer.
Yeah. Like, he's won everywhere he's been.
Hasn't Cignetti?
Yeah,
true. Yeah,
yep.
But
I might take him. I was going to say DeBoer, but I might take Cignetti just because of what he did with less, in year one. But he's got
also what type of program you're at kind of matters here.
For sure.
Now, DeBoer has done it at places with expectations and without. Cignetti has done it only at places without expectations. And they're both pretty decent turnaround artists.
I think that you better have a roster that's ready for Curt Cignetti. A man is death metal. He is. Yeah. It seems like Kalen DeBoer is more of a style that can blend in lots of different places, but Curt Cignetti, you're rolling by Sig's tone, or else you're hitting the streets.
Also, yeah, and that doesn't always work with the most elite of players.
We'll see. And I would say that those are the only other one. Somebody mentioned Elko. I'm gonna say TBD. I mean, Elko's awesome, but both of those head coaches, even if it has not been at the power conference level, both DeBoer and Cignetti have a longer track record as a head coach, and we're talking about leading your team. So